Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg and today we're going to be installing Alpine Linux on an x86-64 regular PC. Then we're going to be actually building an upgrade script in order to be able to keep the version up to date. So it should be a really good tutorial as well as just a fun little endeavor into programming. So let's get right into it. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is just there's a few differences between the x86 version and the Raspberry Pi version. The Raspberry Pi version is very easy to install because really you just have to copy it to any formatted FAT32 USB thumb drive or SD card and just boot from it directly. But for x86, it actually requires a boot partition and all of that to be integrated and included as part of the install. So what we're going to do is first, I'm on the Alpine Linux website. We're going to download the image that we want. There's a few to choose from. You could choose standard, extended, netboot, etc. And the x86 version means it's 32-bit, x86-64 means it's 64-bit. So generally speaking, these days, most computers are able to support 64-bit. That wasn't always the case. If you're using really old hardware, you may need to use the x86 installation, but the procedure itself is actually the same. So we're going to download it, and this is an ISO, so it's not an IMG file, it's not anything else like that. It's not a tar.gz file like we use for the Raspberry Pi. It is actually just a full ISO image. So that's currently downloading right now. So we see it's quite a bit bigger than the Raspberry Pi image. And while it's doing that, we actually need a program to be able to do this. You can use things like Win32 Disk Imager, things like that. But in this particular case, we're going to use Rufus. So pretty much Rufus is an actual image creator, but it has a couple of versions that are available for it. So if we go to their website, we can actually see the actual UI that we're going to use in a second. So we're not going to go through that. We'll just go through it directly. But there's a few versions that we can choose. The first one is the standard, which will install it to your system as a regular executable. And then there's a second one, which I actually like, which is the portable version. And that means that it'll just run directly from the executable. So it won't need to install it. There won't be anything there. It just is fully self-contained within that exe file. So we'll go ahead and download that as well. So now that that's ready to be run, we're pretty much just going to run it directly. Do we want to allow application updates? In this particular case, I'm going to update it manually. So we can go back to the desktop, but it's already running. There's no installation process, nothing like that. It's very lightweight, so it won't take up any system resources with backend, update tasks or anything else like that. So what we're actually going to be using, we're going to be installing the OS to this first, and then we're going to be installing it to this. This is just a little x86-64 Celeron processor. It happens to have a screen on it, but it happens to be a touch screen as well, but it's, just an example of a low-cost PC. In this case, it's also fanless, but it's just got some USB ports on the side and, a couple HDMI ports, Ethernet, etc. So make actually a really good server. And that's kind of the example of what you would want to use this for, is if you didn't want all of the overhead of running Windows and you just wanted to have like a web server or something else like that, it will still run from RAM just like it will for Raspberry Pi, but it will be able to run whatever application that you want, pretty much is the only thing running on there. So you make more efficient use of the hardware. So if it's an older PC or a less powerful PC like this is, it will give you a lot more bang for your buck. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead. I'm going to plug in the USB drive into the computer. And it shows up immediately. It's a 64 gigabyte drive. Now it's asking us to select what type. We're going to use disk or ISO image because we downloaded the ISO before, so we're going to keep that as the default. I have the put the cable on the keyboard. All right, but we just downloaded this image, which is 3.20 is the current version as of today. And we downloaded the ISO image. We're going to select that, hit open. It will read it and it will actually detect what it needs to do. So we're going to be formatting the entire drive because we're not actually going to use this for the actual runtime. There's internal storage on the actual PC that we're going to be running. So we're going to install it to that and we're just going to use this as pretty much the installer drive. So we're going to keep everything else as the default, and we're just going to go ahead and hit start. It'll give us two options. One is to write in ISO mode or to write in DD mode. In this particular case, we're going to write in ISO mode. DD mode just will do a bit for bit copy and can be useful in certain circumstances, but for Alpine Linux installer ISO, it's perfectly fine to use the ISO. It's telling us everything on there will be destroyed. That's perfectly fine. This happens to be blank. And it's USB 3, it's only a gigabyte of data. It should actually go very quickly in terms of what it actually has to copy to the drive. So it's very exciting times. Let's see. So this is going to be just like starting, I don't know if it's going to be a series yet, but it's going to be similarly to how we dove into some of the features and capabilities of Raspberry Pi in previous streams. This is going to be a similar kind of thing, but using more regular PC hardware to be able to do the same. Just based on everything that costs and everything associated with the Raspberry Pi. It's good to have a lot of options to be able to do it. We are going to try also some other embedded controllers in the future, but I'm still trying to get my hands on some of them that I actually want to test. So it finished actually burning the image to the USB thumb drive. Now I exited out of it, but we're going to eject the actual drive to put into our PC to be able to do the installation. All right, so I'm just going to use one of these side USB ports, just pop it in there and start it up. All right, and so I'm going to press the button. There we go. Switch back over to KVM and let's see what we get. It's stretched out because it has the internal screen, so it's just mirroring it. And I already missed it. I forgot I had to press delete. So with PCs, because, in this particular case, it does have another OS already installed, which happens to be Windows. We're going to be installing over that. We're just going to force shut it down because we're going to blow it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the delete key while it's booting up in order to enter the BIOS, and this particular key will change based on whatever your motherboard has chosen. Alright, so let me move this to make a little bit of space. So now we're in the BIOS. Now there's a couple of things that we actually have to change in order to get this ready. So first thing is we need to make sure that we are set up to be able to boot off of an insecure drive. So Windows will do something called secure boot, and a lot of manufacturers, everything else like that, will support that in order to make sure that there's a signature associated with it that's stored in the BIOS to validate what it's booting into, so it knows it hasn't been modified. In this particular case, it's unlikely to actually have our key for the Alpine Linux image. So in this particular case, it's going to be under trusted computing, I believe. Oh no, this is security device. And let's see what we got. And it actually might already be disabled here. And this changes from device to device. So there it is. It says it. So secure boot happens to be disabled on this, which is totally fine. You can load additional keys, things like that. But as long as it's disabled, you won't have a problem booting in. And going over here to the boot screen is the next thing that we have to do, which is we have to define that we want to boot off of the USB. We could do this during runtime, but obviously when we unplug it, it's not going to be booting to it anymore. So as long as it's somewhere in there, that's totally fine. Now, I already have Windows installed, so I don't want to boot into Windows. I want to boot off the USB first. So we're going to go choose that as our first boot partition. Then we're going to just leave it as Windows Boot Manager for now, because we're going to be replacing that on the internal drive. But we'll want to be able to boot into that afterwards. So USB first, we're going to go into Save and Exit, save these changes, and it will automatically reboot. We see it's booting into that USB drive right now. It's quite a bit faster than the Raspberry Pi. In this particular case, this PC has a quad-core processor. It's a Celeron, and it has up to 2.6 gigahertz clocks as far as the clock speed. So it's pretty much as powerful as a Raspberry Pi 5. And I think it's the same speed RAM, things like that, 80 gigabytes of RAM in this particular case. So it's going to be more than sufficient, but it does have dedicated graphics hardware within the CPU. So it's shared memory, things like that. You could call it shared graphics, but at the end of the day, it's actual dedicated hardware, similarly to the Raspberry Pi, but a little bit more powerful just because of its 4K capability and the actual speed. I would say it's pretty on par, but it's about the same price for the hardware as it is for the Raspberry Pi. Not playing favorites, believe me, I use both of them extensively. So going through here, and I did touch the screen. So now that we're at the boot, we booted into the OS, we're gonna log in and configure Alpine Linux much differently than the Raspberry Pi. So logging in with root with no password, we're going to skip doing setup Alpine because nothing that we do here is going to be preserved once we do the installation. So we're just going to jump straight to the installation itself. So the first thing that we need to do is let's make sure that the drive that we're going to be installing to is actually showing up at all. The way that we do that is we go ls/dev. And there's too much stuff here, but we have an idea of where it's going to show up. So it's either going to show up as SDA or NVMe or a few other options, but we're going to start with those and just see where we can find it. So it will be /dev and then will be /SD star. Now be careful, our USB drive will likely show up as SDA. And we see that here. The way that we know that it is the USB drive is if we do df-h, we see media USB is currently mounted to dev SDA. So that's how we know that that's our USB drive. So let's check for other options. And there's two other options that we're going to try. So first one is going to be NVMe. If you had an NVMe drive directly installed, it would show up here as NVMe 0, and then usually an N1, N2, depending on which slot it was in. In this particular case, this is not NVMe. So the third one is the same as the Raspberry Pi, which is MMC BLK, and in this case it's BLK1, but usually on the Raspberry Pi the memory card is 0. So we know this is it because it already has a bunch of partitions on it. I know I had Windows already installed there, And I will tell you this, Windows usually has a lot of partitions. But before we do the actual installation, we want to go ahead and fdisk and use fdisk to be able to partition this particular drive to make it clean. So we don't have the Windows remnants, things like that, and we're able to use the full space available to us. So we're going to do fdisk, and we see that the device itself is actually this one right here. So MMC BLK1. And what that is everything else where you see here you have a 1, here you have a 1, etc. All of these, the other additional characters on the end of them are indicating that they're partitions attached to this drive. And we'll show that right now. But we're going to put in fdisk and then /dev /mmc blk1. So we want to call the device directly. So it says it has a valid GPT file table or partition table with protective MBR using GPT. So it gets really weird, but again, that's just how it happens to be set up. If we want to look at the partitions before we do anything, we hit P. And that will show us all of the partitions that are here. So we see it's got a lot of partitioning going on. We don't actually care what any of that is. We're about to blow that out. So if you get stuck at any time, you can always hit M for help. And the options that are shown here, because there's Windows on this particular machine, are only 4 options. But the first one, right here, where it says, create new empty DOS partition table. That's what we're going to use and install to. So let's go ahead and type that. So now when we hit P again to look at the partition table, we see there's no partitions listed anymore. So it completely cleared it out. It didn't actually erase any data, and it actually hasn't even committed these changes to disk. But we can set up the partitions the way that we want. It will define where it's going to store everything, and then it will be able to use it accordingly. So we want to create a new partition. So how do we do that? Let's hit M again and see what options we have. And we see we have a lot more options than we had before. So the one that we actually want is this one right here. We want to create a new partition. So we're going to type N. It's asking, do we want primary or extended? In this particular case, we want primary. We're going to choose our partition number. It's going to be the first partition on the disk. So we're going to type the number 1 to make it the first partition. Now it's asking for the first sector. So in this particular case, we can go with the default, but this will define where our partition will start. If we want to leave some unused space at the beginning, we could change this number to something else. But in this case, the default is appropriate. So this is where this usually catches people. So by default, what it wants is the definition of the last sector. So the actual exact position on the drive that it will end its that particular partition. We don't know what that's going to be because we potentially want to use that additional space. We don't need the entire space of the hard drive for this. We may want to use it for additional data. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a relative size. So the way that we do that is we put the plus sign, and then we're going to put the number that we want. In this case, we're going to do 16 gigabytes. So we're going to do the number 16 and a capital G. And if you need to remember that, it is listed right here with the plus sign, size, and then kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. And then we're going to hit enter. And now when we print our partition table, we do see that it has a 16 gigabyte Linux partition ready to go. Perfect. So let's write this out. We're going to leave the rest of the space unused for now. We can always come back later and add additional partitions as we need them. So we're going to do W, and I'll show you where that is, but it's write partition table to disk and exit. So now that we've written it, let's see what we have as far as what is available for us to be able to write to. And we see that there's still a whole bunch of stuff here. But the key thing is the MMC BLK1P1 is now what shows up. This one right here. That's the new partition that we just created. We don't care about the other ones in this particular case. They're boot sectors and things that this particular PC is emulating or doing weird stuff. So I'm not going to get into that, but they show up. We just ignore them in this particular case. So now if we were to try and install it, we have that partition, but it's not formatted. So there's no way to store any data to it. So what we need to do is actually format that particular drive. The way that you would format a drive in Alpine Linux is we would do makefs dot, in this case we're going to use a FAT file system, is going to be vfat, and that's going to format it FAT32. That's perfectly fine for the OS. You know, it's not going to need any more than 4 gigs for a particular thing. We could actually format it as a Linux partition, like an ext4 or some other kind of Linux partition, ext3, if we wanted to. But in this particular case, FAT is just fine, and that way it's also readable in other OSs and writable. So makefs vfat, and then we're going to put the partition name. So we're not going to do it to the drive, but it is going to start the same. So /dev/mmc blk1, and then we're going to do partition 1. So we press that and it's done. It's a really quick thing to format it. If we were going to do ext4, it would have to create journaling and things like that, so you actually get less effective space, but it's now available. So we've done all of our prep work. So let's go ahead and actually install the OS to the drive. The way that we do that is we use a utility called setup-bootable. And what setup-bootable is, if I'm just going to do a -help so you can see exactly what's going on. We tell it what source we want to use. We tell it what destination we want to use. So this is going to be our image. And this is going to be our drive. I'm writing this with my finger, so that's why it looks like that. And that's all we have to define. Everything else is automatic. But Alpine Linux is a little bit different versus what we just did to actually get here. So we used an actual ISO image, and we burned it to a USB drive. Alpine Linux is able to use that drive to be able to create or to use it as the installer. And we're going to do that here. So we're going to do setup-bootable, and then we're going to do the path to our actual mounted drive. In this case, it's /media/USB. So that's going to be our source. And then we're going to give it our destination, which is going to be the drive that we just formatted. So it's going to be /dev/mmc blk1p1. And that's it. So now I just hit enter. It's going to start installing it to the internal drive. We'll give it a second for it to finish up. It will automatically create it as bootable. Don't worry about those errors, those 4 errors. The hidden 63 does not match sector 16. It's just saying that our start sector is not actually aligned with the disk. So it wants to be a multiple of 16. That's what those errors mean. But it doesn't actually affect any performance or anything else like that, because we're going to be running it from RAM, so it doesn't even matter. So it's saying that it made that particular drive bootable. Now, there is something else where inside of fdisk, so the installation is complete. You know, everything's good, but I'll show you something in fdisk just for your reference in case you have problems booting to it. So we're going to go back in, and we could have done this when we were editing it before, but when I hit P, we see right here where it says boot, there's nothing below it indicating that that partition is actually bootable. So what we can do, if we hit M for help, we see the top option where it says A, toggle bootable flag. So we can go ahead and do that on this partition as well. So if I hit A, it asks us which partition we want to make bootable. So we'll press the number 1 for that. And now when we print the actual drive, we see that it now has that asterisk underneath boot, indicating that it is a bootable partition. So we'll go ahead and write this out using W, and then we can reboot, and as it's rebooting, once it's in the BIOS, we can unplug the USB drive. So as soon as it shuts down, we can unplug that USB drive and boot from the internal drive. So let's go ahead and do that. So it turned off. I just pulled out the USB thumb drive, and now we're going to boot from the internal drive. Right, and this is just the proof right here. So the USB drive is no longer in there. It is actually booting from the internal drive. Perfect. So now we're back at our prompt, so we can actually just configure it as we would normally. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do root, and then we'll do setup Alpine. What type of keyboard? In this case, US. Our variant is also going to be US. It's asking for our host name. I'm just going to call this x86 install. I don't know why it's wrapping, so... Oh, I know why. So just so you know why that's looking weird. Let me see if I can bring this over here really quick without messing everything up. So this right here, it's actually showing up vertically. I don't know why it natively shows up vertically, but that's why it's showing up and wrapping so soon. If you're on a regular PC where it doesn't have an internal monitor like this does, it will use the full width of the screen. So that's not an Alpine thing, that just happens to be, this is the PC I'm using, so. That's why I did that weird thing with the install. So let's set up the network adapter. So we're going to use ETH0, which happens to be the onboard hardwired Ethernet. And we're going to use DHCP for this. Do we want a manual config? No. So it's going to activate that and get an IP address. In this case, it's 192.168.35.109, which is perfect. And there's a shadow that keeps popping up. That's... Alright. Yeah, the green screen is shadowing for some reason, but we'll ignore that. Okay, so for root password, let's go ahead and define something very, very secure. Perfect. So after we confirm it, we're going to define our time zone. So that way it gets the time correct when it actually synchronizes to NTP. In this case, I'm going to do US Eastern. I don't have a proxy on my network, but if you do, be sure to set it. We're going to tell it what kind of NTP server we want to use. In this case, I'm going to use Crony, which is the default. It's going to start up and automatically synchronize, because right now it thinks it's June 9th at 2 p.m., which is a few hours off. So the date is right because it was set previously, but it's not correct. So now it's set the time, and it's asking us for our APK mirror in order to set up the package manager. So we're going to enable community repositories just because, and then we're going to choose the first mirror, which is the official Alpine Linux CDN. Now it's asking if we want to set up a user. In this particular case, I don't. You know, for your application, be sure to set that up if needed. And we're going to set up SSH. And in my particular case, I am going to allow root user just because, with a password, just because I haven't set up keys and I don't have that other user to be able to log into. But that's not a secure production setting. So if you're going to use this for yourself, it's no problem. But if you're going to use this for any kind of business or anything like that, make sure you set this up with security best practices in mind. It's a very secure operating system, but it will let you not be secure if you don't want to. So it's asking for an SSH key. In this particular case, I'm not going to set one up. So I'm just going to hit enter for none. And Nella is stopping by to say hello. You want to say hello? She doesn't want to be on camera right now, but she says hello. So it's asking for a disk and install. We're not going to install this to the disk because we already have our boot up. We want to be able to run it from RAM as per normal. So we're not going to do a disk install, which would act more like a regular operating system. So we're going to choose none. Where do we want to store the configs? We want to store it to our regular partition, so we will choose that default. And same thing with APK cache. We want to store it to our boot drive. And now we're done. So that error that it got at the end is because it didn't actually do APK update. So if we do APK update here, we see that everything synchronizes. We have 24,000 packages available. And now we can save this configuration to the disk. So we'll do lbu commit-d. So now if we were to restart from here, all of these settings would come back. Everything would be great. Where are you? Do you want to say hello? What are you doing? She wants to hang out. You want to sit on my lap? So you're getting fur everywhere. There you go. So, pretty much from here, we're done with the installation. You can be able to use this. You can install things like LightPD or Nginx or Apache, make a nice web server. You could add FFmpeg to it and make a transcoder. You could install Docker and run Docker containers. You can do any number of things to be able to actually customize this to your needs. And overall, like if we do top to see what's actually running, we see it's using almost no system resources, 0% CPU. And in this particular case, it does have quite a bit of CPU available, just versus the older generations of Raspberry Pis. It's pretty much on par with the newer generation now. So, excellent. So let's Control-C out of this, and we're going to move on to our next part. So what I want to do is actually create an upgrade script. So the way that we would do an upgrade is we would actually go through, putting the cat down. So in order to do an upgrade, we'd actually use setup-bootable again. And I'll just show you this really quick. So it has -u. And actually it's the lowercase u one. Right, so this one right here is upgrade mode. So keep the existing syslinux.cfg and don't run syslinux. So that's totally fine. But I want to try and see what we could do. I mean, there is also fix option and -u, so if you did want to move this between systems, things like that, and you created an image and you want to redeploy it, this would be the option that you would use in order to be able to conform it to that other machine, that other drive that it was installed to. So what I want to do is actually create a script that will automatically download the latest ISO from Alpine Linux and allow us to be able to automate that process to overwrite, or what is technically called bootstrapping, which, I mean, technically setup-bootable, so we're already running from RAM. So usually with bootstrapping, what that is, with other OSs that are actually installed and running from the disk, you would create a RAM version of the kernel. You would then transition to that without restarting. You would then modify your boot drive, and then you would come back, move everything back. So that's what bootstrapping is, because you could restart, you could do pretty much an under-the-hood replacement of files that you're actually using. So in this case, because we're already running from RAM, we don't have to go through all that trouble. We're just going to do the installation again in upgrade mode, and then we'll be able to reboot and we'll be in the new OS. We will have to do a few other changes, things like that. And I have done an upgrade script for Raspberry Pi, but in this particular case, I think I don't have one for this. I actually have been needing it. I keep going to the Raspberry Pi one and be like, no, I need this. So this is what we're going to try and do. Whether it works or not, who knows? We're going to find out together. So first thing, let's actually go back to our PC and just take a look and find where we would find this particular link. So I'll go back into download, the downloads for Alpine Linux. I'm going to scroll to the very bottom. Okay, and it says older releases are found here. Technically, it's all of the releases are found here. It's just the actual repository itself. So dl-cdn.alpinelinux.org is pretty much the repository. And it will show you all of the available versions here. So they have all of version 3 available. But they have this folder called latest stable, which is technically just a pointer. But it has a folder called releases in there. And then we can see down here it has x86-64. And this is where we see all of the ISOs associated with version 20 and all of the variations available. So Zen architecture, virtual machine, standard, netboot, mini root, and extended. So extended is the one that we currently use because it includes a number of additional commands by default that makes the user experience a little easier. So including things like fdisk, etc. by default, makes life easy. So we're actually going to take a look at this and use this in our actual installation. So I do want to point out something. You see where it says RC1, that's release candidate 1, and then release candidate 2, etc. So what that is before they actually release it as the full version, which we see up here, this is what they're going to try and then do final testing, final quality assurance testing before they actually release it generally. So that's what that RC means. It's not a better version. You want the one that doesn't have the RC. So here we see latest stable, releases x86-64. To make this easier in terms of editing, we're just going to log in through SSH so we can copy back and forth. We don't have a web browser on the text version of Alpine Linux, so it's going to be difficult to try and develop it there. So, assuming I remember the IP address, yes, we can log in. And this is why I wanted to enable SSH. So I'm just going to drag this over, do a little bit of window management here. So let's go ahead and create our actual script. So I'm going to VI and do, I'm just going to create it in the local directory, and we'll just call it upgrade.sh. So first thing that we're going to put in here is I'm going to go into insert mode by pressing I. I'm going to do shebang /bin/ash. So that's going to be the programming language that we're going to use for this, which is totally fine for us. I'll give it a nice little title. So Alpine Linux OS upgrade. And now let's put our first thing. So first thing I like to do, or I think I would like to do as far as this script, is let's find out and just save where our current working directory is. So let's create one called current directory. This is going to be a variable. And we're going to set it equal to pwd. Or, So pwd is the command. So we're doing a actual pass through of the actual command as the value for our variable. That will tell us what our current working directory is. So that way we can change around, go to different directories, and then we can end and exit back to our main directory. So now let's actually create a directory inside of the temp folder. Now we want to make sure that it doesn't exist first or it'll throw an error. So we're going to do if, and we'll do dash, or not dash E, so exclamation point dash E, and we'll put the path to the directory. So it'll be /temp, and it'll be, let's give it a name. Let's call it upgrade. So if that directory, if /temp/upgrade does not exist, then we want to make that directory. So we'll do make dir /temp/upgrade. Spelling it right makes a big difference. And then we'll exit out of that conditional. So then that's done with the if statement. So now that we have our directory, let's go ahead and change to it. So we'll do cd /temp/upgrade. And then what we're going to want to do is download our current ISO. So we'll do wget, and we're going to output it to a particular file. So we're going to do -o, and then we're going to tell it what file name we want it to actually have. So we'll call it Alpine Linux extended latest .iso. So we have wget getting us the ISO file, but how do we know which one that we want to download? So we can actually go through and have it go through at this path, which is always going to stay the same regardless of what the version is, and find the actual directory that we want. So I'm just going to stop right here. Let's go out and just do some experimentation with that. So what we can do is we can actually use wget again. And in this case, I'm going to actually just output it directly to the console. And we're going to do, and I think it's capital O, sorry. And then we'll put the path here, and it will tell us this directory listing, and should just print it out to the screen. And we see all of that formatting, everything else like that. That's kind of annoying. So, and I'll make this full screen just so you can see it. So what we see here is we have a number of files. We have the ASCs, SHA-256, SHA-512, and what those are is actually a checksum, so we can validate it. And then we have Alpine extended here, ISO. So what we want to do is we want to choose the latest Alpine extended. So right off the bat, we can do or grep or grep, depending on how you want to say it. Alpine extended. Just so that way we're only getting a list of things that are relevant to us. And next, we want to actually filter it so we get the links. So we're going to filter it by everything inside of these two quotes. And we see that it's a default format, so that way it's pretty much going to be the only thing that the first thing that starts with a quote. So, and let me see. So I'm going to add another or right here, and then we'll go to the new line. And we'll say cut in order to separate it by a particular character. We'll do -d, which is our delimiter, and we want to do it by a quote. So we'll do single quote, double quote, which is what we actually want to cut it by, and then a single quote again. And then we want the second entry within there. So we'll do -f or field number 2. Now when we hit enter, we see we get a much more cohesive list. But we're still getting some stuff at the bottom there where it shows the 100%, you know, all of this down here, which is kind of annoying. So how do we get rid of that? So we'll go up here, we'll go to the beginning, and I'm going to add a Q before the O. And now we see it's just the list. That makes it a lot cleaner. So how do we choose the first one? So what we could do is do OR once again and do sort. Now on the web page it is already sorted, but it's best practice to handle it in case something weird happens. So we do sort, and now it's going in ascending order in effect. We don't want anything that says RC, so let's filter that as well. And actually, let's do that before the sort command. So what we're going to do is grep, and we're going to say it's things we don't want. So we're going to do -v, and we're going to do E so we can do some regex. And we're going to do quotes RC, and then a number 0 through 9 star, and then close bracket and close quotes. I'll add another OR to make the sort work again. So we see we got rid of all of the RCs. And the reason that we did that is we want to make sure it's RC and a number between 0 and 9 afterwards, because otherwise it could be something within the rest of the text. So now we see we just have the ISO.ASC, the ISO.SHA-256, and the ISO.SHA-512. We'll come back to the ones that are actually the checksums. We just want the ISO because that's what we want to download first. So let's see. So sort actually has some options. So if we do sort-help, we want to do it in descending order. So we want the one with the highest number first. So in order to do that, we're going to add the -R flag right here. So we'll go back up to this, we'll do -R. Right, so we see it's now in the reverse order. But we want to get rid of those .SHA-512, SHA-256, .ASC. So we're going to do another grep-v. And I'm going to do it before sort. -v. And we're going to tell it we don't want ISO dot. Right, so that'll just give us the ISO. So it's the only time it's going to say ISO is as the extension in this particular case, so that's a reliable thing. And we see we're down to the one file that we want. If we were doing this, for example, to a different version, and we'll do that in a second, it would actually show more versions available. So let's copy this into our file first, and then we can go and experiment with that. So I'm just going to scroll up here, we'll upgrade it, we'll check out our file once again. And I'll do insert mode, and then we'll put our actual file. So I'm going to put in our request right here. And of course, we need to include our actual path, which happens to be all of this over here. Which I can't see it because it's not wrapping correctly. There we go. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put this in front of this command. So right here, I'm going to paste it in. So I just selected it because this is putty, and then right click to paste. So now we have the full path going to one specific file that we want to download. We're going to download it as alpine-linux-extended-latest.iso. And we can test out this command. So I'm going to save this out really quick. And it's a good idea to test all of your commands as you're going, because it saves for a lot of troubleshooting on the back end. So we save that. It looks like it did not do things as we wanted. So there's a trick around this, which is we're going to cat it. So we're going to cat upgrade.sh. That will give us the full command displaying appropriately. That works. It is actually putting the cut on a different line, so there is an error already. Let's just go ahead and correct that. There we go. So now it's showing everything on one line. Otherwise, it would throw an error saying it can't cut nothing. So we'll cut that again, and now we see it showing up as we want it to be. All right, I'm going to paste that in over here, and let's see what it actually does. It's just going to copy it and actually download it to our local directory. So currently, it's not showing us that it's downloading, but it is downloading. We may need to add a progress flag to wget in order to see it. And it does take a second because it is a 1 GB file. I'm going to wait for it to finish before we continue. Oh, and Fizzy's here. Hello, Fizzy. How are you? So, good to see you. So, as it's going through, you know, I like verbose scripts especially, so it's nice to know that something's happening, because when it's just sitting there, you don't necessarily know what's happening. But it took a little longer, but we do see that it is here. And I did the -O, which I needed to make that capital. So it downloaded 2 files. One was the base file, one was the Alpine Linux extended ISO, which I think is a link. No, apparently it's nothing. So I think it's just a log output. So let's actually correct that really quick. And that might also correct our issue with the display of showing the progress. Just for fun, let's try it again. So let me delete what's currently here. I'm just going to delete both of the files. We will cat this again because we changed the command. We'll copy it, paste it, and run it. Oh, and that looks a lot better. So now it's showing us doing stuff, and it shows us the ETA and everything else like that associated with it. So what we want to do is we actually want to download the file, and then we want to download one of the checksums. So there's an optimization that we can do here in order to make this a little bit easier to deal with. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually save that wget statement, that nested wget statement right here. We're going to save that out as the name of the file and put it in another variable so we can reuse it later. We could just do this again, but then we're making unnecessary additional calls to the server. So there's not necessarily a reason to do that. So let's go back over here. See if we can get this to show up all on one screen. I don't know that we can, so that's fine. So we're going to say ISO file and we're going to set that equal. I'm going to paste the entire thing here, right? Because I just highlighted it earlier, so I still have it in the clipboard. I do need to add $sign here, because again, we're setting it to the value of this. I'll add a little bit of space just so it's clearer. But now we can actually go over here and we can delete all of this. I don't want to delete blindly, so I'm going to scroll over. I deleted too much. I'm just going to save this out. I'm going to copy it from over here just so I don't lose it. Go back in, edit it, and let's get that going. I did have it listed here otherwise. Oh, no, this was the other call, so I didn't need it. All right, so 64 slash, and then we're going to put our variable, which in this case, our variable is ISO file. So we put the $ to denote it's a variable, etc. Perfect. So now we've downloaded that file, and now we need to determine how we want to check it. So we have three options: the ASC, the SHA-256, and the SHA-512. So let's look up how we want to do that. So let's save this out. Let's actually just go to a browser. And I believe it's the hash function, but let's make sure. So let's do verify file integrity Linux. So Stack Overflow, let's see what they say. Let's see what we got. So MD5 sum is a way to do checksums. So one way is we can generate our own checksum. This is just talking about MD5. So SHA-256 sum, it will output this, and then we can just do a comparison. Or SHA-512. SHA-512 is available, so let's go ahead and use that. So SHA-512 sum. So we're going to do an if statement. So we'll do if... Nope. I didn't copy it. SHA-512 sum, and then the file, which in this case is Alpine Linux extended latest OS. Oh, and Fizzy says, I have made progress with MangoPie MQ Pro. I've managed to complete RISC-V kernel, but it boots only once because I don't know how to implement bootloader. Oh, that's tough. I want to try... I'm trying to get a hold of some of those pies, like the Milk 5 and some of the others like that, to use RISC and try that out. So yeah, it's always tough with trying to get it, but once you get it, you know, then it's old hat. Then you know how to do it, and it's a lot easier. So that's awesome to hear, though. That's really cool. Keep me posted on that. I'm really curious about it. So we're going to do the SHA-512 sum to get the checksum of this. Then we're going to compare that against something that we're going to download. So let's go ahead and download something, because we got to come up with a variable. So we're going to do a similar wget to the line above it. And I might want to just use nano just so it doesn't do this weird off-screen thing. Let's go ahead and just do that. No, it's not worth. It's not wrapping. All right. Well, that was meaningless. Okay, so let's go back into VI. It was doing well enough. It's only cropping off the W, which is totally fine. So we're going to go down here. We're going to set a variable. I'm not in insert mode. There we go. Okay. And we're going to call it our SHA-256, or SHA-512. checksum. Okay, and we're going to set that to the output of this wget statement. Right, we're going to have to add something to the end. So, but right here, we know that outputting it to this file is not going to be what we want. We're going to want to output it to the console again, so I'm going to do dash capital O dash. That way it just outputs directly. We want it to be quiet because we don't want that extra stuff in this variable. So we're going to put the Q. And then we want to make sure that we actually have our the correct SHA. So it's just going to be SHA-512 as the extension. So we'll go back over here, and so ISO file, and just because we're going to be putting characters after it, the way to isolate a variable in Bash is to actually put it in curly braces. And then we can put dots or anything else, that other letters, things like that, and it won't care. Right, so we're doing SHA-512 because we're going to do SHA-512 sum of the ISO that we just downloaded. So now we can do the comparison. So, and actually, because we're doing a text comparison, we have to do double brackets. And we'll do the variable. Double bracket to close, then, so we're going to echo valid, else we're going to echo invalid. With an exclamation point. All right, and we're going to test this really quick just before we continue, just to make sure that the checksums, everything else like that, and the rest of the script is working as expected before we continue from here. So I want to just put in some cleanup code first, because we're just going to run this. I don't want it to just start clogging up the system. So after we're done, we're going to do rm-r, and we're just going to delete the folder that we're in and go back to our present working directory. So /temp/upgrade. And then we will cd back to our current directory. And then we can exit 0, knowing that we have finished our script successfully. Okay, so now we're in a state that we can test it. So let's save that out. I'm just going to clear up as much space as possible, so I am going to remove the existing Alpine Linux ISO that we just downloaded. We do need to make this script that we're running executable, so we're going to do chmod +x, and then we're going to do upgrade.sh, and then we're going to do /upgrade. And it did not work because it's messed up something. So something got messed up, probably because of a new line. Fizzy asks about the smaller checksums. Short form is yes, but the reason they start including the, we could do 256. I mean, we could do MD5 as well. And generally speaking, they are very valid, but the issue that they have are what are called collisions, because it's based on cryptography. So the idea is that you could change a combination of characters that would still come out with the same checksum, but insert malicious code. So I just generally tend towards it, because at the end of the day, it's going to take much longer to actually transfer and copy the file than it is to do that checksum. But that is totally true. There is definitely a big O processing cost associated with that. So yeah, it is something where, you know, you can use whichever one that suits you, or, you know, I just tend to, I think the 512 is the is what we're going with here. It'll be a little more interesting. So let's see. So what I want to do is let's go back into this, take a look at what that cut file is. And I think it's this showed up as a new line here. So I'm going to backspace that because it should be showing up as one line. It shouldn't be wrapping. And that's where our error came from. Let's try it once more. All right, so this time we do see it saving. And let's see what we come up with. Is it going to be valid? Is it not going to be valid? And just to show Vizzy's point, I mean, I'll change it over to 256. The actual command difference is just changing that 512 to 256 on both sides. So we could do a quick comparison. So let's see how long it actually takes after it finishes downloading. So it saved it. It will have to compute it based on the entire thing, which is going to take a few seconds. It says it's unknown operand, so I have an error in the code, but it did actually take that long in order to be able to compute that checksum. So where do we have this error? And what we may need are quotes. Because I think it has special characters. There we go. So we'll put this inside of quotes, and we have to use double quotes because it is a variable. If we put single quotes, it will actually take it as a literal and not replace the variable. So, but we could change this to 256. Because it will be quite a bit smaller because it does have to compute it based on the entirety of the file. But I don't think it's going to be that much time save. I don't think there's any kind of... Well, there is some hardware acceleration associated with this inside of the CPU since we're using what in effect is a laptop processor. So let's try it again. And it did delete it after that. So if we actually go in and look, just /temp, we do see it's empty. So we'll have to download it every time that we run this. Kind of annoying, but you know, I think at the end of the day, it's more indicative of what we're actually trying to get to in terms of the end state for the script. "15 seconds, let's see. It's much better with a progress bar. So now it's saved, it's computing the SHA-256, which is significantly less. It still says invalid. So let's see. We may need to, let's see if there's a better way to do this. Because we're just doing a direct text comparison, but it may be different as a result. Let's see. So let's do SHA-256 sum. So they're doing the echo. Check status. Oh, is that really a thing? Let's see. Let's try that. I'm just going to do this directly in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out that download just so that way we don't have to re-download it every time. And what we'll do here for the actual download is I'm gonna put if it doesn't exist. So that's what this is gonna be. And then we can use it, it will reuse this file, save us a bit of time every time. It will re-download the SHA-256 every time, but that's fast enough to where I don't think it'll be an issue. Okay. And it should automatically overwrite everything else like that. So it doesn't like this, but it won't do anything as a result, so that's totally fine. So let's do this. Let's download it once more. This way we don't have to keep re-downloading it. Then we can do some experimentation on the file directly to be able to see what we actually want to do with it. So. And actually, I just to kind of expand on the point that you made about the time complexity of doing the computation for the different size checksums. Let's just take a quick look and we can use time to actually time the process. Because I am curious what the difference is on this particular CPU. There are benchmark utilities that can tell you what its encryption capability is, which is the functions that are used for actually computing those particular hashes. But I think that would be really interesting. So just for fun, let's do time, and let's do SHA-256 sum /temp/upgrade Alpine Linux ISO. And let's see what we get. All right, so it took 10 seconds of real time. And let's do 512 and just see. And just so you know what those particular metrics mean, the real is real clock time, user is the amount of user process time, system is the amount of system time. And in this particular case, 512 was faster just because of whatever optimization they did inside of this particular CPU. So that is not always the case, but it is something where, you know, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, because I think it's still going to take longer to download. So we could go back to using 512 or other one, and I think the other one was an ASC file. I'd have to look at it. It may be MD5. Actually, just for fun, yeah, let's do MD5. And that one's the fastest. And that one is actually pretty much the baseline, and it has been for a long time, for doing checksums, things like that. And you see how much faster that is in terms of validating what's actually going on with it. So MD5, totally fine. SHA-256, totally fine. SHA-512, totally fine. So pretty much anything, SHA-1 is the one that is completely susceptible to that type of collision issue that I was talking about earlier. So that's why they don't use it anymore. MD5 is literally pretty much just for checksums, so it's totally fine for it. So let's see. Oh, so I see what's happening here. So when we actually do MD5, we are getting the file name on the end of it, which obviously is not going to match what is being presented by our download. So if we were to download that, we would need to actually choose this one particular thing. So just for fun, let's use MD5 since that is the fastest, and just come up with what we'll actually need to put on the end of it in order to make it match. But I do want to try the other thing, which is coming up with the native integrated solution in the various summing functions for the hash to see how they would do it. But for this, just awk print $1 awk is great, and what it will do is it will get rid of everything after that first number and just kind of trim it down. So if we wanted to fix the existing code, and actually we can just do that since it's just that, But I do want to try that other thing, just because if there's a better way to do it, let's go ahead and do it. And let's keep this at 512 since it's faster. Oh, I see what happened here. Well, that's always going to be blank. I only changed it in one place. So that came up blank, so clearly that was never going to work. So, and then here we're going to do or awk print $1, and this is just to proof it, just sanity check, so to speak. So it is downloading it again. I'm not entirely sure why. Let me check that really quick. I had a spelling issue. Okay. Still says invalid, so clearly the methodology is messed up, or we need to do the same thing for the other one. Actually, we didn't look at any of these files. Let's see what it actually has in it. So since we're doing 512, kind of wish it would just open it, but you know what? So it does have the full name of the ISO that we downloaded, but we could trim that as well. That's previous stuff. So just for fun, what we would do is insert mode, and we would put the same awk statement here. And now, theoretically, it should actually come up and say valid, but it still doesn't, so that's fine. And it may be because of that file name too. So we may need to actually download it as the appropriate file name, because I think that's being computed in the sum. Let's see. So let's see what it has here. So we had this, where it's just outputting what it has. Archive tar.gz is the actual file. They're piping it to it, but I don't know why it needs that. It seems like we could just attach that to the end of it. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do it in the file just since we're downloading it anyway. So let's delete all of this. Okay. So we want the SHA-250, the SHA-512 of the file. So we would do -C we would echo this. So we do a nested echo. Actually, we don't need to. SHA-512 checksum. And then we would do our file. And again, we may need to correct the name because it's messing it up somehow. We'll do -s ISO file. That should be it. We need to do some kind of actual check here, and I'm not sure what it will return. So pretty much what it's saying is that it prevents output, and it will either say valid or not valid. So let's do this. Let's just echo what's going to be. Let's just do this. Let's not even do anything. And let's see what we come up with. Unexpected, I didn't trim the back end. And I also spelled it wrong. So maybe it actually does need it. Let's see. So let's do echo SHA-512 checksum. And what it actually had was the ISO file, so let's just do the exact same thing that it had. Let's see what it comes up with. And I don't think it's working. Let's see. And I think part of it is just because we're not downloading the file directly. So let's just fix that. Let's stop coloring outside the lines on that and see what we can get to. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to put a wildcard, and I'm going to get rid of this -o. That way it just downloads the file directly, but it won't re-download it if it already exists. We do have to clean up really quick just to make sure that it will re-download it. Otherwise it will have an issue. And instead of doing this particular checksum, we're just going to download this file as well. So instead of doing this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do the cat once again. And that should match the syntax that we see referenced on the page. Now, granted, we're only going to one source, so I don't know that it's valid, but it looks like it has 70 votes. Oh, wait. We didn't do the cleanup after all of that. We will have to wait for it to download again, but let's see. Hopefully it's the only time. That's still my morning coffee. I do think, yeah, and Fizzy says maybe the checksum isn't a string. I do think it is. Well, now that it's downloaded, let's actually check that, because that is completely valid. you know, it could be something else. Usually it is just a string though. Right, and it mentions the name. And we're in the local directory when we're doing this, so it shouldn't have any kind of relative path or anything like that included. And let's actually just run the SHA-512 on the other one and just check. And let's just see what we come up with. Because that looks exact. Now that the name is the same, right? C47E9, C47E9. So theoretically, those should evaluate to be the same. So maybe we just go back to the way that we were trying to do it before, instead of trying this newfangled fun. So let's do this. So we'll do SHA-512 sum. We'll do the file that we want to do, which is Alpine Linux extended -star.iso. Yeah, and we're just going to output it to the console because there's two files there. I want to make sure it's not going to accidentally do the .SHA-256. Actually, what we can do is, let's just do this. And we'll do the same thing. So -v .iso. I need to correct the formatting here. All right, and let's just see what we get straight out to the console. ls, not a directory. I need to put a dot. It probably worked, but let's see. It's doing something. Oh, it's extended. Oh, I see. Just no Linux. So then the real question is, why isn't this... Oh. Why did that work? So, yeah, just to clarify, so the name was not matching, so the logical, so it's just, I put Alpine Linux instead of just Alpine extended. All right, let's try this. So see how it gives the error because the file exists? All right. We will do the same thing here. Oh, actually, we know what the file name is. So there's no reason for me to do this. I should just put the variable. Again, spelling variable names right. All right, and we do see that we're getting the right output. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save this to a variable, or save this to a file. So let's output this to checksum.sha512. And it's just going to overwrite it if it exists, so it doesn't matter that it's there. And then we'll do a comparison, but let's just generate it first, and then we can just check how we're going to compare it. Okay, so now if we ls into /temp/upgrade, we have 3 files. Our two checksums are there. So let's cat them. So, right, we got that one, which again, not exact. The checksum should still be the same. Oh, 1 minute. Yeah, I can get rid of this. And then I want to cat the other one. Which is the same except for the /. So now it should be identical. So if we actually bring these through doing the same thing that we were doing before, so apples to apples, so there shouldn't be any differences in terms of the file because they both exist as files. We don't actually care what the name of the file is. So let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this all in bash, and actually we can do this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cat this and then greep the checksum from the other from the checksum. So we're going to greep It's not doing auto-completion. It's there. SHA-512, I didn't put a dot. No, we did awk. Right, so now that we got that, or wc-l, and we see that there's 1. So it matches. So we got an idea of what we're actually going to put here. So pretty much what we did is we grepped for the checksum that was inside of the other file on the output of the SHA-256 or SHA-512 that we downloaded from Alpine Linux website. And if it greps that it has that containing in it, it will return it and then we count the number of lines returned, which should be 1. And obviously, if it doesn't match, it will show 0. So we do WC for word count, -L for number of lines, and that gets us at 1 or 0 return, which is a lot easier to validate. So that is very true. So Fizzy says, shouldn't the script contain a function checking whether the downloaded file is inside the directory? That is very true, because we can't necessarily take for granted that the server wasn't inaccessible or something like that. So let's add all of this right now. So we'll make sure that it exists. So we'll do if -e, and we don't want to use Alpine Linux extended ISO. Actually, we don't want any of this, so let's just do some cleanup so it doesn't look messy. So let's see, so -e, so ISO file, and I realize I didn't put this inside of brackets to keep it consistent. We're going to do the same thing down here. And we'll check the other one in the same if statement. So we'll do just the name, since we define that statically anyway. Although, did I just delete the thing? Well, whatever. We're going to recreate it. Nobody's gonna know. All right, so once those files, if both of those files exist, then, I mean, we could just do the check like legit inside of that same if. Just for clarity, and simplicity, I'm just gonna make it a separate if statement. So let's add some comments here. All right, and then up here, we'll do the same thing for validation, and we'll just exit if it doesn't download the file. So if it doesn't have it, it'll download it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in quotes. Because I'm trying to think of what would happen if it came up blank. But one step at a time. And we'll do exit 1 if it doesn't exist. Maybe we should oh, actually, we could also just do $? Which would just check and make sure the wget didn't exit with an error. Let's do that. So if it exited with a non-zero status, we're going to echo and say, problem downloading file. Okay, so we gave it a nice verbose error message. All right, so if it exists, we continue on. All right, so if these files exist, then we're going to compare the files. So we're going to do exactly what we just did a second ago. So we're going to do, and this is a numerical comparison, so we're doing single bracket cat ISO file needs another $sign. Nope, needs not extra characters. Oh, no, that's what I was doing. Yeah. .SHA-512. And what did I do? Yeah. So checksum.SHA-512. Awk. All right. So just explaining what we had, same thing as we did before. So we had our cat going through SHA-512. We're grepping for our checksum, but not the file name, counting the number of lines, and if it equals 1, then we'll do things. All right. So now that we have it, checksum is verified. Do things. Right, we'll close this out, so we'll do phi. Actually, we want to do if the checksum doesn't match, let's put an error. So we'll do else, or no. Actually, yes. Give it a nice error, and again, exit 1. And for here, we'll actually do the same thing where we give it a nice, if it's unable to verify checksum, we obviously want to exit as well. Perfect. Let's test it up to this point. Okay. We probably want to add some more print statements so it says what it does. Oh, syntax error. So what happened here is I didn't leave a space. Thanks, Fizzy. Have a good night. Take care. So, all right. So it says we're ready to go. So now we can actually put in the code to be able to do our setup bootable, to be able to upgrade our existing OS based on that. So going back in here, we verified the file. We know the file is good. So what we're going to want to do is to mount it. So actually, let's just do this on the console really quick. Right, so we want to mount, let's see, where can we mount it? Let's make a place for it to mount. So let's do make dir /temp /upgrade. And let's just call it something. What do we want to call it? ISO. Perfect. All right, so now let's mount it. So we're gonna mount /temp /upgrade Alpine Linux and /temp /upgrade ISO. Yeah, device node. I probably have to add a -t ISO. Let's see. All right, we're good with this one, so. Right, mount -o loop. I didn't try that. Let me do loop. It looks like it's doing it anyway. What am I doing wrong? Mount ISO. They're using mount ISO, but what's the difference? Because temp technically, yeah. Okay. So we'll make a mount directory for it. All right, so let's do make dir /mount /ISO and do it there. And the reason is because technically it recognizes that mount is in a different thing. I'll show you in a second. Assuming this works. If it doesn't work, then I'm not going to show you. So. Well, I'm going to show you anyway. So df-h. It's tempfs for the entire OS. Why can't it mount it? It keeps saying invalid argument. I wonder if it's permissions. 1 minute, let's see. Nixcraft is good just because they kind of give good explanations. And honestly, that's where our reference came from, so. Actually, I want to see something. Can we just use it directly, or do we have to mount it? Maybe we're going too crazy. Oh, yeah. So specifically, it says source can be a directory or an ISO image. So we don't have to do any of this. So ignore that. Perfect. All right, and then we got if destination da-da-da-da. Okay, so the flags that we want for setup bootable, we want to do the lowercase u. We're not going to do the -f flag because theoretically syslinux.cfg should be fine. And we want to know what's going on, so we'll do -v. So -u and -v. And we can do -c as well to do a check. All right, so let's go back in this. All right, so instead of doing other things, let's just cut to the chase, as they say. So we're gonna do setup bootable -c U and V. I'm just ganging those together, so. And then we'll put our source, which is going to be our ISO file. And then our destination is going to be our actual bootable drive. So we need to get that. So, and I believe it has to still be the physical drive. So what we're going to do, df-h. And this is always the tough thing, because how do we actually determine what it is? And there's a few options, and this is where I think it always gets weird, because if you mount another partition, how is it going to know which one's which? Like, I feel like there should be some kind of directory or something, or file on the file system that says what its boot drive is for Alpine Linux. I mean, it's obvious in other OSs just because you're booted off of it, but this one, it's technically creating the overlay file system, so it's not directly apparent. Let's just do this. Let's do cat/etc fstab, which is our mounted directories. But again, this won't work because you could have a second entry in there for a second partition. So it's not necessarily going to be something that gives you the warm fuzzies at the end of the day. Let's see. Let's see what's in the etc folder. I know one that I've used in the past that actually isn't that bad is if we do cat/etc/apk cache. No. Let's see, arch. Yeah, it gives us our architecture. So we could actually use this to be able to determine what we would need to install. Well, that's how it goes. So let's just do, oh, LBU. Because if we go in here, it says LBU media, and just say that's what we're going to use. Oops. And just assume that this is our boot drive since it holds our cache. So I think that's fair enough, and we'll just run with that for now. So let's do VI, upgrade once again. We will go down here, setup-bootable. All right. So let's paste this in here. And we'll just do /dev/ whatever that is. And then technically, the upgrade should be complete. And let's see what we got. Now, technically, this is actually going to apply the upgrade right now. So let's see. Before I do any of this, I'm going to save this script. So I'm going to do lbu add upgrade. No, I can't do a relative path. I have to do /root /upgrade. lbu list. We do see it there. lbu commit-d. Now let's run it. Let's actually do the upgrade. I think we do need to make it a little more verbose at the beginning. So, could not find any syslinux.cfg. That actually does not matter. It's not modifying syslinux, so we could just not do the check. And in this case, we don't have grub installed to be able to validate it. So it's a weird thing. So now we've gotten it to install things. Okay, and if we actually do cat /etc, or not etc, /media, mmc blk 0p1, what are our options? Alpine release. Right? We see that's our current Alpine release. So what if we, instead of doing the latest version, we did a specific version? And I think that's something I want to add as an optional flag. So if we go back over here, right, we have these options right here. And what we can do with this is we can actually go through wget right, we see all of those there. So what I'm trying to think about is, you know, if we wanted to do a different version, a version back or something like that. So what I'm going to do is do a quick regex. I'm going to make sure it's only stuff that starts with V. Which it did not do. Okay, so that's looking good. Oh, and that did a crappy job sorting because it's 2-digit numbers. And let's get rid of this. Let's actually do... All right, so those are the versions. And we can add this as a flag. Okay, so we got quite a string over here. I got to remember to move that new line. So we'll go back in and edit this. So we'll do this. So desired version equals $1. So if desired version is not blank, then we'll do some validation. So we'll do available versions put our code. I gotta get rid of this new line. Right, so that gets us our list of versions. We want to make sure that it's in there. So we want it to be WC-L. All right, so if cat available versions I need the $. It is plural. Or grep desired version. Right, and then count the number of lines. So if desired version is in there, then we'll do if it's there, then we'll find out what it is. And it's pretty much just going to replace that one directory. So version is going to equal whatever that is. Okay, and we'll take that whole path. We don't want the slash at the end though, because we do have the slash here. Actually, we'll put the slash in. So we'll do else version. I put the $sign on both of these when it shouldn't have it. Okay. So it will be latest stable. Do the same thing over here in case there's something weird that happens. And then we'll just put phi. Right, then we'll go down here. And we're going to put version. Right, and remember how I said you could put the brackets in order to be able to make it so it's not going to, you know, have issues with reading next character, things like that. So since we're going to include the slash, since that's actually how it prints out, we'll just keep it simple from there. So we just got to do the same thing for all of these. Right, make sure we don't have anything else. Perfect. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna uncomment this because we actually want to delete. We're gonna do full end-to-end testing. So if we don't specify anything as an argument, it will do it, and I need to... Okay. All right, so let's run the end-to-end. I noticed an error already. I can get rid of all of this, and I don't have to sort it because it's really not needed. We're just making sure that it's there. So everything after the grep. So let me just correct that really quick. Because of course the versions need to be longer than what we're putting in. Okay, perfect. An error. Unknown operand. So what's it doing? I think I missed something. Let's see. This has to be in quotes because it can also be blank. Okay. So now it should run the whole thing. We're just doing the baseline to see what we had. Could not find any syslinux.cfg. So that's fine. I'm going to remove that -c flag because I don't want it to be annoying. Let's just make sure. Right, this time it did delete it, so now we're doing the full end-to-end. It's not rebooting anything, it's just continuing through. And it will be our responsibility to reboot, so I'll need to add a message or something like that to it. I am going to post this to GitHub just after this, just so in case you want to use it in the future, and also just so I have it for the future. I think it's going to make, hopefully, things easier to be able to remember to stay up to date in terms of keeping the OS upgraded, not just the packages. Oh, and we can add package updates as well. That's actually probably best practice before we actually upgrade. And converting the package version inside of APK. Resource busy, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's totally fine. Now let's make sure we actually didn't bork the system. So let's reboot it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and actually downgrade the version, because theoretically it should work with the downgrade as well. So I'll try and putting in 19 and seeing what we get to. It should be okay. I think there's interoperability between the packages to where there's nothing that we've installed specifically that would cause an issue. All right, I'm just going to log in through the console. So right, we can do cat /media /mmcblk0p1.alpine release. We see it's 20. So we did save this file, hopefully. So good. All right, so /upgrade. Oh, did I make changes and not save it? Let me... Ah! All right. So you know what happened? I didn't save it before I rebooted. I want to add that back. Let's see. Do I have it printed to the screen somewhere? I do have the wget statement, so that's perfectly fine. Because notice how I did the commit after that. All right. We know what it is. Let's just do it. We're gonna make this work. Oh no, I did save it. Whatever. All right, let's do it from the actual thing. We didn't make any changes. Everything is still valid. The world is working great. Everything's perfect. All right, is it gonna come back? No. So we're doing this from SSH. It has to boot up with it connected for some reason. So, all right, so we're gonna do upgrade /upgrade.sh. Now let's say 3.19. Right, we could also do v3.19, but let's see. Nope, didn't work. Let's see, can't open no such file or directory, so it's trying to do something we don't want it to do. Oh, I see. This also needs to be in quotes because it's got spaces. Let's see. Same deal. So somewhere it's actually doing a comparison that is not what we want. We'll put this in quotes as well, even though technically it can never have spaces. But somewhere we're doing a comparison for version. Oh, because we're using cat. We should be using echo. And we'll do -e. And let's actually also just echo it here. And we do need to make it better at cleaning up. I think that's the big thing. So instead of just bailing out, because what we can do is just add a cleanup script up here to make sure it deletes it, but I'll do it manually for the time being, because I'm force quitting it. So where is it getting messed up? Oh, I did the same thing up here. I should be doing echo. And putting this in quotes. Actually, let's try it without the E. Okay. So it chose the correct one. But then it's saying unknown operand, so there's something in there that's not necessarily great. So it's getting multiples, so that's an issue. So it looks like it's getting multiple versions. So what we're going to do we're going to echo ISO file just to find out exactly what we're getting. So it looks like it's getting 2 because it has 19.1 and... Okay, perfect. Not perfect, but something workable. So what we need to do... So we're going to have it choose the first line, which will make it the latest version of whatever that version that we're choosing is. Right, so now we see it downloading. It's choosing 3.19.1, which was the latest version of 3.19 that was available. And hopefully it goes through the rest of it and is able to just continue, so then when we reboot, we will see that our major version has changed over to 3.19 instead of 3.20 on our USB drive. Or not our USB, our internal hard drive. Okay, it chose the correct SHA to 512. Perfect. So let's make sure it actually worked. Right, so we'll do cat /media /mmcblk 0p1 .alpine release, and it has not changed. Did it work? I don't know. It may not replace it, actually. But let's reboot, and then we'll find out. We're almost there. It's in the home stretch. It is booting. That's half the battle. I don't remember what the kernel version was for 3.19, so I don't remember if that's the case. If 6.6.31 is that one. Still says 3.20, not a good sign. It may be because our packages installed are 3.20. So there may be other things associated with it, like we would have to replace all of our package files with that version. And this is where I always have trouble with doing the downgrade. But let's just check our OS, right? So let's do, because that's not the end-all be-all, because the 3.20 that we see here actually refers to the version of Alpine base that we have installed, that particular package. So for that, if we actually downgraded that package, we would downgrade the major version for Alpine Linux. So technically we could do this all under the hood. Remains to be seen. Because we may just, like, literally all of this is useless and it doesn't matter, but I like doing the thing from the ISO because there's a bit more verification involved, but technically we could, there's no reason we couldn't do this from APK in the repositories. It would just be based on what it boots. But then you're basing it on the cache directly. But if they change the bootloader and all of that, I don't know. 6 in one, half dozen the other. This is what we're trying right now. So maybe it's all useless. Maybe, you know, we could have skipped all of this. But let's see. Drum roll, please. Um... 3.20 still. Okay. So it didn't work. It said it worked. I think going for major versions, it would work. But here's the thing. So it would recreate that. It would fix anything associated with it. But what we probably really need to add, and I'm just going to try this just for fun. It may mess up the system, but we can reboot. I'm not going to save it. So we're going to do apk add. Let's do apk info, Alpine base. And we see there's only versions 3.20 available. But if we vi in and we do /etc/ not in it, apk repos, right? So these are all version 3.20. But if we make these 3.19, if I spell it right. Okay, so now it has that. So now if we do apk info Alpine base, we see 3.19.1 is available. So let's try that. So we'll do apk add Alpine base equals 3.19.1 -R0. Right? So it just downgraded it. So now let's do cat /etc. Alpine release is still 3.20. Let's do apk cache sync. Let's do apk cache clean. And let's see, I'm going to try it. Let's see what we get. Still booting, that's half the battle. But you do see how fast it boots up because it's internal storage opposed to it being a USB. Still says 3.20. It may not like going backwards. That's the issue. But forwards, it shouldn't be an issue. Like, this will actually do the upgrade and get it there because that's literally what its intent is. I don't know that it will go backwards. But we won't know until the next major release. So I think that's going to be it for today. It did do what we wanted it to, just doing it again, just so we can enjoy and relish in that moment. We can see it downloading everything. This is the physical machine, so again, the format is different, just because it happens to be the vertical screen. But yeah, we do have it running successfully on this little tiny machine right here that we just installed. And once it completes, we will be in an exciting wealth of opportunities of potential applications for how we can actually use this. So there it is. So thanks for watching the video today, or the stream. If you stuck through it this long, I really appreciate it. But if you know anybody who would like these kinds of videos, be sure to share it with them. I would appreciate it, and I hope they would appreciate it too. And if if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you like the video, be sure to like it. But other than that, I will see you next week. So take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.